Is it this one? No. Huh. This one has no dates at all. Good going. Getting closer. Yeah. Almost. One of these days, I'm going to start labeling the outside of my sketchbooks. How's it going? Well, I just got back from yet another physical therapy session for my shoulder, and it's a little sore, so instead of painting, I think I'm going to take advantage of these days where I'm kind of hurting a bit and talk to you instead. Got an idea from my friend Christine. She's thinking of showing sketchbooks. And I thought, well, I could show some sketchbooks. In fact, I could show you the ones that I was keeping when I was on my trip in New Zealand 10 years ago, which inspired me to start this whole penguin series in the first place. So I'm going to pull all these out and find the ones I'm looking for. So you can see here, that was January 2013. And it's so funny, I go drawn entirely from memory. So I had been looking over maps so much that I was trying to show off, I guess, that I knew where everywhere was that we were going to go. But we went from the North Island, and then we went to the South Island, and went all the way around by car. And we saw so many awesome things and met so many wonderful people. But I'm just going to do a quick overview of a few of these sketches because it's a lot. Now I've put my camera up on a mount here, so I'm not going to be shaking so much. I do apologize for that earlier. So I do draw a lot of people in the airports and on the planes. But here we go, our first New Zealand sketch. When we were at our, what's it called? Would you stay at a, not bed and breakfast, but hostel. We were at a hostel, that's right. And so everything I came across, I was writing about and documenting like I was on a different planet. You know, all the plants and the trees and all the stories about them. You know, and went to beaches. It was gorgeous. Just don't do it justice, but I was too busy doing stuff than to, draw the entire beach. We went to the area where they filmed The Lord of the Rings, or were actually in the process of filming The Hobbit at the time. And just beautiful, bucolic landscape. New Zealand, or Eritrea, is a very seismically active part of the world, being in the Pacific the way it is. And so there were geysers and volcanoes just everywhere. And so they were fun to draw and sketch. And there were fish pools and waterfalls, and we're still in the North Island at this point. We were by an area called Cape Kidnappers, where there is a wild gannet colony of thousands of these amazing birds that are just flying around and landing on rocks. And they had their babies, and they were so cute. And it was really kind of warm, so they were all panting in the heat. And they were just so fuzzy and cute. And while I was out sketching, a Japanese film crew was there for their version of Good Morning America, only it's like Good Morning Japan, and they actually filmed me sketching. So I guess I got seen by millions of Japanese folks, but I never got to see a recording of it myself, and I still can't find it anywhere on the internet. But I had my few seconds of fame. And this was, Napier's a beautiful town right on the coast there. And unfortunately, back in the 1920s, they suffered an enormous earthquake that just shook everything to pieces and destroyed the town. And so they built the town completely from the ground up using Art Deco architecture. And we happened to be there during what they called Art Deco weekend, where everybody in town dressed up like they were in the 1920s. They had old vintage cars and dressed like flappers and in their fancy suits and duds. It was amazing. But I was just fascinated by all the bungalows in Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. We went to the Te Papa Museum. We just hung out. A place with lots of museums. They had lots of stuffed animals that hold very nicely still. Unfortunately, they're a little dried out and desiccated, so they're not completely true to form, but you do get a nice still model to work from. And once again, it was just paradise. I could have just stayed there and drawn forever, but you know, we had things to explore and see, so I had to go real quick with this. But you can see the little seagull. It was just so much fun. And once again, I didn't have time to fill it all in, so you know, I just do a quick line, and then I was sitting there in the grass and I would sketch. But there were no less than 12 separate waterfalls streaming down, and you can see the glacier right here. It was like a lost world. It was absolutely phenomenal. So much to do in Queenstown. You know, pressed for time. There's another woodbit. That's a real one. See, it's much more plump. Beautiful. We were on our way to the famous Milford Track, which is about a 35 mile hike in southern New Zealand, once again through an ancient glacial valley. We had there was like a 2-year waiting list back then. I'm guessing it's even more now. But we were very, very, very fortunate and blessed to get to do that. This is a kakapo parrot, once again stuffed. Their numbers are very grim right now. There's just a handful left in the world. And this was Richard Henry, who was one of the most famous for his lineage. He was very prolific in making more of his kind. And he was at the visitor center in a under glass. And so I very quickly tried to draw him. That was my first attempt at a kakapo ever. But they're almost more furry than feathery. They're completely flightless, amazing birds. I hope to actually draw a live one someday when I hopefully go back. So on the Milford Track now, we had to go by bus. Then we took a ship going up through the glacial valley on the water to get to the track. And there was just amazing, huge mountains. And of course, the ubiquitous bugs. We spent the night in 2 different places, going up and over the ridge into the valley. And this was one of the places we spent the night at. And it was getting kind of dark, but so I very quickly drew this before we crashed and went to bed. And here's some more dramatic glacial drawings. Once again, didn't have time to shade and do anything else, but just record the shapes of the rocks. I often wonder about expeditions, like how did they do the same thing then fill it in later? Or were they just really, really, really fast? And this is some of the sea life, well, what do you call it, fjord life in the water. They had a visitor's center at the end that you could go downstairs in a tube and look at all the critters that live in the water. It was amazing. And more plants. These are beautiful flowering plants that were just everywhere at that time of the year. And once again, this was the view from the ship. This time we're on a different trip, by the way. This was to Doubtful Sound, which is not visited as much as Milford Sound. And it was highly recommended to us from people who had been there before. And boy, was it worth it. We were there for, once again, 3 days, 2 nights, I believe, if I remember correctly. And there were rock lobsters, which were pretty cool critters. And this is a map of all the places we went to in the Sound. And we saw dolphins, and we saw penguins, and we saw albatross, and just a myriad of creatures. It was so amazing. And of course, you can't go to New Zealand without seeing a ubiquitous kiwi, of which we saw several of the species they have there. And just boats and places. Believe it or not, New Zealand has, I think, up to 5 or so species of penguins, maybe more, that visit their shores because they're just a hop, skip, and a jump from Antarctica, if you look at the map. And penguins get around. So these were the most rare of all penguins in the world, the yellow-eyed penguins, also known as the hoiho in Maori. And I'm going to talk more about them when I do the painting to get out. But this is one of the beaches where we saw the yellow-eyed penguins. And these guys are real introverts. They don't hang out with hundreds of their own kind or thousands like other penguins. They're kind of introverts. And they'll come in at night on the shore and they'll just call out to each one of them, to their friends at night saying, I'm over here. Where are you? You're over there? Okay. And we also saw a wildlife sanctuary for the northern royal albatross, which are enormous, amazing birds. I can't remember the size of their wingspan, but I think they're the largest of the albatross. And albatross are big anyway. But this was from a stuffed specimen, once again, that held nice and still. So everybody's a little peaked, a little moth-eaten. And this was a seal kind of lounging around by a tidal pool. This is where we're heading up the other side of the South Island. And here we go. This is by Oamaru, which is where the blue penguins, the world's tiniest penguins, live. And so I sketched them and a stuffed one here. I believe that was a stuffed one. And whoops. And then right before I started recording this, all these things fell out of the sketchbook. I'm such a hoarder. I hung on to all the unusual candy wrappers and tickets and just documentational ephemera. Goes right in the pocket. So, oh, and I forgot to mention that usually my favorite sketchbooks historically has been Moleskine or Moleskine, depending on who you talk to. They got really nice, tough covers in the pockets, as I've already shown you. But what I didn't know when I was on this trip was that some of these that they were coming out with had thinner paper that wasn't like the normal bulletproof thick paper that I'm used to. So, but this was wrapped up in cellophane or something, and by the time I got there, I had no idea. So I was kind of bummed out that it was so thin and flimsy. So beware, there is more than one kind of sketchbook by these guys. So once again, some more tropical plants. We definitely don't have these in Colorado. It's a proteus, but at the time I was like, unknown plant. And okay, so then we went on, still in South Island, to Akaroa, which is famous for, it has some dolphins that show up called Hector's dolphins. They're one of the world's rarest dolphins. And we were so fortunate we actually got to see them surfacing. They have these kind of interesting rounded Mickey Mouse fins. And they have several kinds of lighthouses around the area. And we went to a little private museum that had all kinds of cultural artifacts, once again. And I was just absolutely fascinated by all of the Maori patterning. And it's a nephrite jade, and they just made all these amazing ornaments. And just random restaurants. Once again, just quickly drawing before the food showed up. But see how the thin paper, you can see the writing on the other side. It's total pain. And unfortunately, that earthquake had taken down a lot of buildings in downtown Christchurch. And so I remember we were eating at a restaurant and looking out, and they were working on this church across the way. And I made the mistake of asking the lady who was working there, had she gone through the earthquake, and she just had this really worried, nervous look and just kind of brushed it off. And I was like, probably shouldn't have asked her. It was probably really traumatizing for everyone who lived there. More penguins. This time we were at the Antarctic Center, and they had penguins on display there, but some of them had some wonky bills because they were domesticated and I guess, had some issues. And but we learned even more about penguins while we were there. And I got to sketch even more penguins. I have no idea what that's supposed to be. And I think that was it for this particular trip. Well, those were my New Zealand sketches. Thanks again, and you have an awesome rest of your week.